What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Poker Hands. And today we're going to be taking a look at a huge hand that happened from the Full Tilt $1 Million Cash game. But before we jump into that, I have one thing that I want to talk about. What was it again? What was I going to say? I was going to mention something, I feel like. I just remembered. We're breaking some new ground on the channel. We're going to be doing a giveaway. I'm giving away 2% of my net profit on my upcoming trip. That's across a 25K high roller, some high stakes cash games on Poker Night in America, and also my $50,000 heads up match / tournament with Phil Ivey and Dan Cates and Frank Casella. So could be a hefty chunk of change. Make sure to jump in there for the giveaway.
That spot.
Yeah. Matusow, king, queen.
Ooh, interesting decision here for David Benyamine. Do you re-raise pre-flop? Do you flat call? He just flats.
Cool.
I think he's got a flap call because Mike Matusow is the original raiser.
And Mike playing tight. But you also feel might get tricky. He's still got 3 players to act behind him as well. I like the flat call.
With 9s, good chance Mike's got a pretty big hand.
Mike, raise? All right.
That's going to bring Ellie in.
Trying to double up on the last turn.
Oh, this will bring Patrik Antonius in. 5-8 offsuit. I'm not surprised.
Those cards are live, so to speak.
Our hand begins with Mike Matusow opening it up under the gun with King-Queen. Certainly a standard play, but what happens afterwards, not exactly so standard. After Mike's raise to 4,100, Ivey decides to call under the gun +1 with Jack-10 suited. I don't hate that play. I wouldn't mind maybe 3-betting it, but it's certainly a hand on these really deep stacks that I don't mind just taking a flop. The action folds to David Benyamine on the button, who looks down at pocket 9s. Now, 9s is a hand where you can go either for a call or a raise. It's right between the two options. One of the good things about raising is if you think your opponent is either opening too light or you want to knock all the blinds and the straddle out of the hand, then you can knock all those players out except when they have some legitimate holdings by re-raising. However, if you get too much heat, then 9s can't really hold up, so I don't really mind either way, and I actually like the flat here on the button. Tom Dwan looks down to the small blind at ace-8 offsuit and shows some pre-flop discipline and makes a good laydown. Even though these hands might be ahead of a lot of the other hands your opponents can have, when you're out of position this deep with hands that don't really play well, can't really hit flushes and straights very easily with ace-8 offsuit, then you end up losing a lot more money on later streets. After Tom Dwan gets out of the way, Isildur looks down at Jack-9 suited in the big blind. I think this is a pretty clear spot to call. Your hand plays nicely post-flop, and you have a lot of other hands you might want to look to re-raise. It's really not quite strong enough or weak enough to be a hand we might want to make a move with. So he does decide to go ahead and call, and now the action's on Antonius in the straddle with 8-5 offsuit. And look, I know Antonius isn't thrilled to take a flop here with the 8-5 off, but he's getting an amazing price. He's probably up against some hands that he can get some value from should he hit. And maybe every now and then he can work in a move to try and take the pot down without having any showdown value. So it doesn't take too much to make this call profitable. Let's take a flop.
4, 7, 6.
Oh,
Check it.
5-8 offsuit just hit gin.
What did I say? He's got live cards, sort of, and there you go.
I said I wanted the 7-6 suited on my last hand.
Look at this flop, though. Isildur flops a flush draw. Overpair for David Benyamine.
12. 12,000.
Unfortunately, they dealt me the ace-king.
It's a tough spot for David Benyamine.
12,000.
I think I might flat if I'm him. That's a scary-looking board.
Now remember, because Patrik doubled up earlier on with the aces, he now has 204,000 in front of him.
Definitely got enough to cover David Benyamine and put a big dent in Isildur.
Cool.
Benyamine calls, and how do you play this if you're Isildur?
This is really tough. I just flat in case I'm against a bigger flush draw here. I don't want to play too big a pot with a medium-sized flush. Patrik Antonius with the nuts has to be going, what's going on here?
Well, he loves what's going on. He knows he doesn't want to see a club, though. Certainly doesn't want to see a 5 either. That'll kill his action.
The flop comes 7-6-4 with a flush draw. Pretty big flop. Antonius flops the nuts. All of a sudden, those pot odds looking pretty good. We also have an overpair for Benyamine, a flush draw for Isildur. I mean, there are a lot of hands here that are pretty strong. Our hand gets a bit weird though because Antonius decides to take the betting lead and bet 12K here on the flop into around 21,000. Now, the reason that's weird, normally you check to the pre-flop raiser. However, on a board like 7-6-4, the straddled player has a lot of good hands the other players won't have. No one else at this table that's involved in this hand should really have a hand like 8-5 suited, other than maybe Isildur because he was in the big blind. And a hand like 5-3 suited is even less likely, and then the offsuit varieties no one would have pre-flop. So this is a board where Antonius is basically saying, look, I have a lot of good hands that you guys don't have, so I'm going to start betting here with some good hands, and then probably also a few bluffs or semi-bluffs, maybe a hand like 9-8 or 10-8 or Jack-5 of spades, something like that. And I'm going to balance out this range by having my, some of my very strongest hands, including the nuts here, bet as well. Only takeaway from this move from Antonius that I will say, if you see someone doing this, then when they check on the flop in the straddle, it means they're a lot weaker and you should be even more aggressive with them. So remember, if they're going to lead good hands, their checks mean they're not quite as strong. Just a little tidbit for you guys. Anyway, Antonius bets 12K, and now the action is on Matusow. Matusow gets out of the way, Ivey lays it down, and now the action's on Benyamine and the button with pocket nines. And this is a pretty difficult spot. There are almost no safe turns for nines. I mean, even if he hits a 9, some 10-8 gets there, so an extra straight gets there. And I think he'd take his chances with turning a 9, but I'm just showing that there really aren't any great turns. A club is terrible. A 5 is a disaster. An 8 gives him an open-ender, but now a 5's a straight. A 3 is terrible. Overcards suck. This is a spot where even though he might be ahead here, and he could very well be behind as he is, this hand has very bad playability on later streets. But there is a good thing. He is in position and gets to go last. So he decides to make the call. I don't mind that decision. And now the action's on Isildur. Isildur with a flush draw here, I think I like a call. If he check raises and gets 3-bet, he is going to be up a creek. So by calling, he makes sure that he gets to try and realize his equity. You might want to raise here with a much stronger flush draw or a much weaker one where you're okay folding to a 3-bet or you're okay playing for all of it. Let's say you had a hand like 9-8 of clubs or ace-5 of clubs. With those types of straight draws, you're okay if you get it in against something pretty good. You're going to have a ton of equity either way. So he does decide to make the call, and let's take a turn.
King.
Check it. That's fine.
King looks like a pretty safe card.
Benyamine probably doesn't like the king, but at the same time, you don't really put your opponents on a king in this kind of flop, right?
Yeah, so far now, unless somebody had a king-high flush draw. King-high clubs, that's about the only possibility. I like a lead again here by Patrik Antonius, though.
Ellie checks. Action on Patrik. He has the nuts.
Bet about 35, 40,000. Punish him for those draws.
Benyamine, by the way, cannot win this pot. Isildur still can. He has a 4-1 dog to win it, though.
Oh, and he's really going to punish those draws.
39,000.
39,000 to bet. Pot now 96-6. 39 to call. If you're Benyamine, you got pocket nines, but not only you got to worry about Patrik, you still got to worry about Ellie behind you as well.
I'm starting to feel like if I'm David Benyamine, I might not have the best hand anymore. And I also think that Ellie feels like he's got a flush draw. So I'm not worried about Ellie as much, but I'm definitely afraid Patrik Antonius leading into this board into 2 players.
Cool.
Benyamine makes the call.
Ellie's got a tough decision here. I think he almost has to call.
How many black chips again?
Is his flush draw good? That's what he has to ask himself.
Well, he's also trying to figure out how much money Patrik has behind. If he hits his flush, is it going to be worth it? It's 39,000 to win 135.6, plus the implied odds if he hits his flush.
If he knows that his flush draw is good, it's an easy call. But trying to figure out if his flush draw is good, I don't know. In this spot, I might actually muck this hand.
A monster pot here, 135.6. He's got the black chips in his hands. Those black chips are 25,000 each.
I don't think there's any chance he can raise here, though. It just doesn't look believable. I think it's got to be debating just a call.
Sorry. Another 10 seconds.
I'm telling you, he may fold this. And he does.
And he does, wow.
Take this one, I'll keep this one.
Ellie lays it down.
I'll give you a price if you play with 1 card.
If a club comes, he's going to shoot himself.
The turn, which is an offsuit king, is music to Antonius's ears. He still has the stone nuts. Even though he's multi-away, he's most likely going to be taking this pot down. Now, he does decide to bet once again on the turn, and I like that play. Once you have the betting lead, you should generally keep betting. It's okay to work in a trap every now and then, but your go-to play with good hands should be hammer them for value. Now to the button, and Benyamine kind of just has to let his hand go. You know, even if his opponent was bluffing, the kinds of hands he might bluff with are hands like 9-5 or 9-8 or 10-9, and you block all of those possible bluffs. You know, it might be a bit worse to have an 8, you know, now you block even more bluffs, but you also block 8-5, and you also have more equity against good hands, so this has to be one of his worst possible hands to call. He could get back raised by Isildur. He can call, and then every river is going to be bad. There is no reason you have to call here with pocket nines, and I know what you're saying. It feels like you should call because you flopped an overpair. You should try and see what the guy has, but it's a 5-way flop. As flops become more multi-way, you want to be more conservative with what you're willing to go the distance with. Pocket nines has almost no playability and isn't strong enough to go all the way, so he should ditch his hand right here on the turn. Anyway, he does decide to make the call, and now the action's over to Isildur, who's got a tough spot with a flush draw. You know, if you wanted to occasionally work in a bluff raise, and I'm not saying that I think that he should here, this could be an okay hand to do it with. You'd probably prefer to have a hand where you have a straight draw and a flush draw. I actually made a move like that in the one drop with ace-10 of diamonds, but sometimes you can't always pick out the exact hands. I think I like his decision here to fold, but I wouldn't mind considering my options for a raise. He's definitely not getting the odds to call, though. He might be not drawing to the nuts. Either player could have the ace-high flush draw, and then he's just basically dead, and his odds aren't very good, especially because he's out of position. Anyway, Ellie gets out of the way, and let's take a river.
Well, now Patrik cannot lose the pot. Just a question of how much more money you can make out of this one.
Queen.
Another overcard.
Ellie loves it right now. Ellie just saved himself 39,000.
Sure does.
100,000.
100,000. Wow. A tough one for David Benyamine with only 66,000 left. 130-something thousand in the pot. It's getting 2-1. Once I've called the turn, I might call the river here.
I mean, all he can beat right now is a bluff. All he can beat is 6-5, 5-4, 7-5, something like that, right?
The river is an offsuit queen, and things just couldn't get better for Antonius. He held, he got some action, and he still got the nuts. And he decides to move in on the river for the remainder of his chips, which, again, I like his play here. You know, he's going to maybe work in some bluffs every now and then with some of those draws that bricked, but he's also going to want to make sure to get some value. It's extremely unlikely David Benyamine has a very strong hand. I mean, he could possibly have a set and have slow played, but with the exception of that, he's almost never got a hand better than one pair. So attacking him in this spot with good hands and weak hands does make sense. Once Patrik is all in, Benyamine is in a difficult spot, but you knew this was going to happen, David. When you call the turn, you have to know there's a good shot they're going to fire the river, and there are not going to be almost any good rivers for you. I mean, realistically, this offsuit queen is one of the best rivers for David Benyamine. Maybe it's not as good as a 9. Maybe it's not as good as a hand, a card like a 4. But it's still one of the best cards. None of the straight draws get there. The flush draw doesn't get there. This is a top-notch river for David Benyamine of all rivers that are possible. And what I'm really trying to teach you guys here today about this situation, if you get to this spot where you call the turn with a hand that can't really improve, you have to have decided you're going the distance. You have to be calling them down. Now, he shouldn't call down. His hand is too weak here. But if you're not going to go all the way with these hands that can't improve, just ditch them on earlier streets. It's always okay to make a bigger laydown on an earlier street so that you set your range up to be more protected by the time you get to the river. Anyway, when David's in this spot, it's difficult. There are a lot of hands that have you beat. You don't have very good removal. So what can you really do here other than lay it down?
I think this is the longest decision we've had today, and an important one.
Well, we can't discount the fact that Benyamine and Antonius have a lot of history together. Benyamine knows Antonius very, very well, but at the same time, Patrik can be so confusing. Face of stone, giving nothing away.
Oh, and he makes the laydown.
Nice laydown by Benyamine.
That really was. That was a hard laydown.
Well, it was, especially when he made the call on the turn.
Thanks for joining me today for Poker Hands. Remember to enter that giveaway. The link is in the description below. A lot of action coming up, 2% of my net profits. Make sure to enter. If you want to see how I'm doing, I'm going to be updating on Snapchat at WCG Writer.